Hey guys, welcome back to the Fairway Performance Podcast. I've got another repeat guest here, Dr. Luke Benoit. He is the founder of the Ripstick and the new product that they've just launched, or not just launched, but recently launched, called the Butterblade. Dr. Luke, what's been happening, mate, since we spoke last? And let's give the listeners a quick little intro of who you are, what RypGolf is, and what you're all about.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Shaun. Excited to be on again. So I teach golf in Minnesota, director of instruction at Interlochen Country Club, and then kind of founder of Ripstick. So, definitely dive into the speed training side, which I'm pretty interested in, and then teach a lot of golf in person. And, like you, starting to do a lot more online as well, because I think there's so much efficiency you can get with that. So I'm doing more and more of that, do a lot on Skillest. And so people can reach out if they want to do some of that. I think lately my interest has moved towards really efficiency of training motor patterns. So my background, I got a PhD in motor learning, and I'm particularly interested in how can I find the best way to fix swing flaws fast? And a lot of that is just really deep dive into the research, and also really understanding how do we change how people think about swing changes? How do we get efficient with that? So I've kind of created some models that I think we can talk about today that I think will be relevant to that search. And I'll give you a little background. Like when I started teaching, I was just kind of like a lot of teachers, try to fix one thing at a time and try to move people along kind of sequentially through a sort of a stage of learning. So let's say we'd start with lesson number one as grip and maybe stance, posture, and then we start working on swing path, and then we close club face, stuff like that. And I would work people through these changes and we would get somewhere. But I also was wondering, am I doing this way too slow? And is there a problem with my process in terms of coupling changes? And by coupling, I mean, if I change element one, I need to change element two so that they match. Okay. And then it can work and the golf ball can go straight. So if you're over the top and your path is way left, well, you probably should play with a, shut face that matches and you can get a fade to go to the target, right? Now, if we start changing the path, now I got to dial the face. So they're coupled. And so I got into this idea of what if I just took away the golf ball in my training and I had people perform really, really good, robust golf swings without a golf ball? Could I do that well enough that I don't need to do it sequentially? Could I do it all at once? And so that's really what I've done online is I teach people to literally rebuild their golf swing, and we do it immediately. We do everything all at once. And with that pattern, I've kind of built what I call a 7-step process for changing your entire golf swing very rapidly in a couple of weeks or a couple of months. And a lot of it involves foam balls, which you'll probably hear about, and they're starting to get more and more popular. And then also understanding how to use what I call freezers and slow back swings to speed up the process. So it's all just deep dive motor learning stuff to make the swing change as fast as possible. And then we start kind of problem solving as we go. And it's a very iterative process, but that's kind of the nuts and bolts of what I'm doing differently. Really where the whole thing kicked off was when I started teaching online a lot, because I had to be very descriptive about what to do for people, give them benchmarks to go achieve. And I found that I actually had better results online than I did in person, and it blew me away. So
Mate. Yeah, I completely agree with the better results online than with in person. As you know, when we spoke last, I was actually still in Sydney, Australia, running my CrossFit gym and then running this as a separate side business. I've now moved overseas and sold the gym and moved into this full time as of the last sort of year and a half. The business has been running for many more years than that, but the last year and a half has been full time and it has grown massively. But a couple of things that you said there really resonated. One is that results for clients is better online than it is in person. And I feel there's just so many more touch points that you can get across to someone, and there's so much more efficiency with the language and everything that you have to use with someone online. And then they go away and they can implement it for many hours versus having to see them 3 times a week and they just get that one snippet 3 times a week, essentially. And then I love that you ask yourself the question of how do I do this more efficiently and how can I affect more things at once? Because if we have an individualized approach for each person, then we should be able to affect more things, and we should be able to give them specific exercises, drills, movement patterns, learnings, whatever it is, so that they can actually get the most from what we're telling them. Essentially, it's just the same as building an exercise program for somebody and giving them, the 20 exercises they need versus the 30 or 40 exercises that they could potentially be doing. But they know that every bit of practice they're doing is moving them in the right direction versus a bit of fluff on the outside, if that makes sense. Now, tell me a little more about the efficiency of, because I just talked about it there, the efficiency of giving people the specific exercises to do in the gym rather than giving them all the fluff. How do you isolate the specific things for people when going into their swing characteristics and swing faults? How do you specify those things?
Yeah, so I really look at what they're presenting to begin with, and it could really run the gamut of, okay, do we have path issues? Do we have what I'd kind of call like ball flight things that are easy to clean up, or do we have more deep problems we want to solve? So that goes a little bit into your timeline. Like, I'm also super respectful. If you have a tournament next week and the golf ball is going 80 yards right, we're going to get that golf ball going straight. Like one of my claims, and I know it sounds a little arrogant, but like, I've never had somebody leave with a slice. Like, that's unacceptable. Like, 1 hour lesson, no, you're not going to slice it. I don't care if we got to get the face pretty shut and the grip really strong to make it happen. Make sure you can get that thing cooking, because you got to play in that next tournament. So you got some of those kind of what I call like short-term ball flight related fixes. And then if somebody's like, hey, my ball flight's okay, I just miss both ways and I'm not consistent, then we need to kind of rebuild the entire pattern to get more consistency. And that's where we dive into starting to do freezers and slow back swings and kind of follow that process. And I can walk you through in as much detail as you want, but I think that's the overview. Yeah.
Awesome. We'll definitely come back to that, because I've just written it down on my iPad in my notes here. So we'll definitely talk about freezers and the slow back swings. I think the key thing I wanted to jump into straight away, because I've just had it so often lately with many of my clients and people commenting on Instagram posts and DMing me and stuff, is the big topic is early extension. And I know in your bio in Instagram, it says I fix early extension. So firstly, just to give context as to what early extension is for people who may not understand it or don't know what that swing characteristic is, can you explain it? And then can you explain like potentially how it occurs? Like, what are some things that you think people have, like, hip mobility, whatever it might be, that cause that early extension?
Yeah. Okay. So early extension, everything that a teacher comes out with probably is at some level a little bit personal. Like, the reason I probably have gotten good at solving early extension, because I fight early extension, and I certainly did as a college player. And a lot of people do. So early extension means basically extending your spine, going this way through the shot, standing up. And so what you'll see as I stand up is now my hands start raising up. And so the problem is with my handle going up, we'll also see that the handle flip and the hands get pretty wild at impact. Now, there's a certain amount of early extension that's pretty acceptable, and there's matchups that could work. So if you take a guy like Jack Nicklaus, like, you could definitely argue that Jack had some early extension. He also won 18 majors with that swing. And what Jack did really well is he partnered it up with really good width. The club was really far away, so not a lot of angle coming in. Like, it was wide. And he also was a good athlete, and he committed to hitting fades most of the time. So he had a good set of matchups for early extending. And without a doubt, you can work around some of it. But you're also going to see that for a lot of people, if they get a little narrow in the downswing and they get a little steep, they have to move out of it. You're going to see a lot of face rotation, basically the motion-dependent torque of the shaft dropping under late. And then we have to flip the hands pretty hard at the end to time it. So that's why we're trying to fix it. The converse of that is, if I can get somebody to feel the chest stay lower, the shaft shallow, and then the body rotate, it's a little easier to time impact. So that's kind of, in a nutshell, defining.
Yeah. And because so you obviously work with the technical aspect of it.
Sure.
The teaching of, the biomechanics and how the swing should look and feel, and coaching, either tactile, visual, or audible cues, like you're going through there. What are some limitations within the body that you see cause early extension? Because we know there's a direct correlation between how your body moves as to what swing characteristics will show up. TPI has done the research and shown us this.
Right.
So how do you see it show up with some clients?
Yeah, there's no doubt, and this is where guys like you come in, because if you fail the deep overhead squat, if you can't stay in posture, literally doing this test, which, like this one, if I can't do this and keep the club head on that side of my toes and keep my heels on the ground, I'm probably going to early extend. I will say that that's pretty predictive, right? Would you agree with that?
Yeah, 100%. Only 1 in 4 golfers can do that as well.
Right.
Yeah, 25% of golfers.
Yeah, so if you're trying to play golf and you physically can't get down to that deep overhead squat, it could be your lats, could be calves, could be hip tightness, would generally?
Yeah, any part of the body. The reason the overhead squat is part of the TPI test is because it's testing range of motion and flexibility, mobility through all the joints pretty much.
Mhm.
Thoracic extension and flexion. It's looking at ankle mobility, dorsiflexion. It's looking at hips, knees, like whether you can get your knees over your toes, all that stuff. So there's so much that comes into it. But pairing it with lat tests and other tests of the upper body, it allows us to split whether it's an upper or lower thing that we need to focus on.
Love it.
As a fitness person, yeah.
I love it. So in terms of, I said, if you're coming in slicing, I can guarantee we can fix that in one lesson. Fixing early extension in one lesson is much harder. And that's because one, we may be dealing with physical limitations like you discussed, and we got to pinpoint those a little bit. And then we could also be dealing with a motor learning pattern. And, I see a lot of people where it's probably more motor learning than it is physical. But there's some times where I can just literally watch a guy walk up to the driving range and I know there's no chance he's going to stay in posture because of how he walks. And I can tell the hips are tight. You know what I mean? And you can too.
Yeah.
So we got to diagnose, and that's where screening comes in, and connecting with a fitness pro is really, really helpful. But let's say they pass the test, or even if they don't pass the test, I don't think it's a problem to start working on the swing as well. I think you can do both at the same time. So then we start to look for what causes early extension from a motor learning standpoint. And so much of it is related to pitch of shaft and width of downswing. So, I'll give you kind of like a couple anecdotes here. Like, let's say I had a golf swing where, Miss Haverkamp, country club member, has no speed and does not rotate body at all. And Miss Haverkamp is up at the top in a good position, and the club just throws like this. And there's no rotation. And then at the last minute, she kind of turns her body. She probably actually won't early extend that much. So a lot of early extension is caused from steepness, and steepness is caused by body rotation kind of going this way. And then it's also pitch of the shaft, which is probably more around kind of what I would call like forearm rotation, being able to turn the shaft this way. And so teaching people how to understand to pitch the shaft this way and then start to get lower into the ground and rotate is the whole key. And so that's kind of where we can dive in, and I can walk you through that. What I will typically start with for a lot of folks, and I've got kind of like a program for people for this exact flaw. So if you want to dig deep, you can watch my video on it for sure. But in a nutshell, I'm going to teach you how to start right here in a nice position with the arms out in front. We've got a little space, and you'll notice as I'm doing this, like I've got a big wedge between my hands and my chest. I want that space because that allows my trail arm to go external and to shallow the club a little bit. So if I'm here, it's much tougher for me to get my elbow in front, which means externally rotate. I can't get here very easily if my elbow's stuck behind me. If my arms are extended, then it's much easier to let my trail elbow fall and let the club shallow. So one of these tests is like you put an alignment rod on the elbows, and as I start down, the alignment rod should fall down like this. This trail elbow will pitch the shaft this way. So I've got to understand that move. And then you get into the nitty gritty of like, do we go think a lot about the body, or do we go external cue and think about the club itself? And typically I'll try both with people and I'll let them decide. Like a lot of the research I've done is that, internal cues are pretty effective, but external cues are often easier. So for a lot of people, I'm just going to like have them think about pushing down on a pool noodle all in a lesson. I'll grab a pool noodle here, and they're going to take it to the top, and they're going to feel like they're pushing down on the pool noodles to start their downswing. And that's how I'll begin the work on it. So they're going to get it up here, and they're going to feel down and pushed away. You can see how my arms, I'm not trying to create any sort of lag and or rotation of my chest. So I'm literally increasing my moment of inertia of my body by extending my arms, which allows me to go external in the trail arm, and the club will feel like it's pushing a million miles away from me. And then as I'm down here, now I can engage the ground, lower my chest, and rotate through. And it's this super kind of counterintuitive thing, but you know how a lot of people struggle with shaft lean and compression? It's actually a piece of cake if you can shallow the club, you can lower your chest, and you can rotate. If you do those three things, you can't really have bad shaft lean. You could still chunk it, but you're not often going to repeatedly struggle with low point and shaft lean. Which is wild, but it's true.
Yeah, 100%. And I think I was literally talking about this with a client the other day, and it's the reason why when you go and watch the pros, like the ball flight from them and like a really good amateur, the compression and the ball flight just sounds so much different because they can do all of those things and stay in posture. For someone who has early extension, they have a very weak ball flight, and they have a an inability to get that forward shaft lean and good compression because they're not covering the ball, they're extending into it and their hands are turning over. That's a weak position. It's not using all that inertia and torque that we can create in the swing. Now, I love all of what you said there, and I think that so many people listening are going to get a lot out of that. It's like pretty much just like a free golf lesson right there that they can just take away and start implementing some of those things. And I'll get you to send me the link that you're just talking about to that training, and people can jump onto that and have a look if they want to dive further. In terms of the motor learning aspect of early extension, one thing that I've found, and this is through my journey, and I'm not sure if you have other clients that are similar, I'm assuming you would, but I've found it quite consistent among a lot of clients I work with, is as children, we develop this, if you've played golf as a child, so I started, when I was, I don't know, like 4 or 5, sporadically playing, and then playing a lot as sort of 8 to 15 years old or 17 years old. And as a small boy, like that was, shaped like this Apple Pencil that I'm holding.
Yeah.
I didn't have much strength or power. So my only ability to produce power was to jump, which is an extension of the legs. So that's what caused me to create a lot of power in my swing. Now, what I found with that as I became an adult was that because I would extend my legs, I would then, as I got to the ball, I would either do one of 3 things. I would leave the club face open when I early extend. I would leave the club face open and I would block it, and it wouldn't spin necessarily. It might fade a tiny bit because the face is open and like cutting across it a tiny bit, but it would be a block. Most of the time I would time it pretty well. I'd just hit this like high consistent draw because I was good with my hand-eye coordination because I've been playing golf for a long time. And then when I had bad days, I would hit a duck hook that would kill some ducks in the lake, like just really snap off and sharp duck hook. One is like, what's the motor learning that you go through for somebody like this? Because obviously they've got so many repetitions under their belt of doing it as a kid and then going to an adult. What's the sort of process that you would go down for someone like this as an example?
Yeah, I mean, you're describing it super well, and I was an early extender too. Like I have videos of me in high school trying to play high school golf, and my spine was literally this way on that side of vertical, so I was bending back.
Yeah.
So we know we have a big project ahead of us, and my journey to kind of more or less fix it took like a decade because I was trying to play golf. I didn't really know what I was doing while I was trying to do it, and it took way too long. Now I feel like I can get there. You give me a 16-year-old kid, like we can do that in a couple months, easy, right? You give me a 30-year-old guy that's working hard, we can do that in a couple months. You give me a 60-year-old guy, it may take a little longer, right? It depends a little bit on age and how hard they work. But the first step is understanding that it's all about downswing first. So we're going to retrain the downswing. So if you think about like how much time do you have during a typical golf swing to change your downswing? If I go back, the whole swing takes about a second. I maybe have 0.1 seconds and I've never done it before. It's almost useless for me to go to the range and just think about keeping my butt back and my chest down. Like it just doesn't change, right? People are so bad at actually doing what they think they do. So if you think about all the guys that are like putting the golf bag behind them or the bag stand, and they go do the drill. It's really hard to do. It's possible, but where I found a huge progress, sort of like expediting that whole process, became doing downswings first. So I take away the backswing and I just teach them the pattern without a golf ball, because that's the other thing is like, if you're trying to hit a good shot, you really have 2 masters, right? So we have this focus of attention thing and we have our priorities. Like, let's say I'm trying to hit a good shot. Suddenly it's almost impossible to make the swing that's completely different. You're not going to hit good shots. So typically what I'll say to people is like, let's first start without a golf ball. We're going to start without a golf ball and just do a freezer. I'm going to teach you the movement pattern. It's almost like learning how to do, how are you going to do a deadlift properly? We're going to learn how to do a downswing properly, right? And that's so wild for people. So if I could get in the minutia of it, like if I'm trying to make this easy for somebody, I probably would prefer a slightly more neutral lead hand grip, which will promote more flexion of my left wrist to shut the face. If I'm really strong in my left hand, that's going to make it a little bit harder to get into flexion. So that's my preference. That being said, like I don't want you to be blasting shots way right, but I'd probably go a little more neutral or weak with the left hand. And I'd probably go a little stronger with the right hand. The advantage of that combo is that it's a lot more comfortable for me to stand here with flexion of my left wrist and my right wrist is bending back. And now I'm in a position where I have a lot of, we call it like ulnar deviation or wide angles in my swing. Now, I'll preface this with, I teach a lot of high level players. Like I teach a lot of 0s or better, and I teach a lot of 10 handicaps that want this wide, shallow downswing. And that's why I do this. if you go to the average teaching pro that teaches a lot of hacks and people that are slicing it, they might prefer a stronger lead hand grip. But I'm not afraid to go strong with that lead hand. Again, we shouldn't have people slicing it, but understand that I'm trying to create a wide shallow downswing with a lot of golfers. So anyway, that's why I go to probably a little bit weaker lead hand, which is maybe like 2 knuckles versus 3. And then the right hand or trail hand is going to feel pretty under. So I don't know if I can show this to you, but that's kind of the feel. And we're going to go up to the top. And this is where we're going to feel that wide, shallow swing. And we're going to feel like this. Chest going down, club going down like this, where it feels like the center mass of the club literally falls behind me. And I feel like I'm almost pushing my arms away and the club is down like this as I start down. And then I go ahead and feel like my mass goes over my lead toe. So now I'm starting to think a little bit about ground force, because if I can get my mass and my chest going down this way, now I can react by pushing off that lead foot. And I don't know if you want me to get in front so I can maybe show, let me see if I can find a better spot to illustrate this in a second here. Apologies, I'm trying to get a setup where you can maybe see my feet a little bit.
We've fallen down.
You lost it. Sorry.
It's all right.
Yeah, maybe I can't get this quite dialed here. But basically, what we're looking for is a really good way for people to feel like they're going down into the ground over the lead foot, and then we push off that lead hip and rotate our hips.
Mm-hmm.
And when we get that combination of ground force, then you can understand that you're creating a lot of force from the ground where you don't need a lot of wrist angles to create speed. Because I call this, a lot of this is like almost dirty speed. It's going to make us go far, but it may make us go kind of erratically. So that's how I start. And we'll do a lot of freezers to begin with. Once that freezer looks really good, then we're going to start doing interchanging between freezers and slow backswings as our drills. So any thoughts so far? I'll see if I can set up the camera here so I can get you a little bit better view on this thing here too.
Yeah, so just on the freezers versus the slow backswings, the freezer is what you've just described there, going to the top of the backswing and just practicing that position, right?
Yeah, so freezer's going to look like this. You see me okay?
Yeah.
The freezer's here, and I'm just literally going to feel like this, going down, and then throw the club around. So this is the move where we begin. Now you'll see, like, how much does it look like I'm lowering my chest as I do this?
It looks like a lot.
Right. And ultimately, like, we're not like trying to lower our head 2 feet, but if you don't train to lower your head 2 feet, you got no chance to keep it, steady, right? So we know that in transition, most good players are going to lower their chest and lower their head at least a couple inches in transition. So you're going to see that right here. You'll see almost everybody who hits it hard goes down a little bit, okay? Now, to learn that move, you're literally going to feel like you're going that. So that's how I learned the move. And then if I want to put it in the golf swing, that's where I really would go through the 7-step process. And I'll walk you through it. It's not a secret. But literally, I do the practice swing first without a ball. And then the next step is I go a slow back swing. It looks like this. 1, 2, 3, down and through. That's a piece of cake. Then I go back to freezer. Okay? And I'm going to keep rehearsing these until the minutia of every move is perfect. Down and through. Then I go back to slow backswing. 1, 2, 3, down and through. You can see as I'm doing these, like I can keep my speed up. Like for me, I can get my 7-iron speed as I'm doing these freezers, get up to 90 miles an hour. So I'm trying to create a lot of speed as I do it. And that's where I think it's probably a little bit different than how a lot of people think about speed training and mechanics. I think the whole industry is bullshit on it. I think it's awful. People are saying, go speed train and it's going to make you straighter. That is bullshit. Not true. Speed training can make you straighter, but it can also make you really crooked. So I had a guy yesterday who had pretty good mechanics, and he did speed training, and he got straighter and longer. And I could have predicted that because he already had pretty good mechanics. I've also seen people work on speed training, and they hit it 1,000,000 miles. So the solution is do speed training while you're also doing mechanics. So you're improving a better golf swing, and you're also gaining speed. So that's the whole key. Now, to do good mechanics, freezers are an unbelievable tool. So I'm trying to like literally grab my ripstick here and get this thing out to show you the move. And I'm going to get the radar going, and I'm going to see if I can cook with the freezer here at 120 miles an hour. And you can call it mechanics or you can call it speed. To me, it's both. And so that's like in a nutshell is kind of how I would train it.
Yeah, 100%. I love what you're saying at the end there. I do think there is a bit of a disconnect. I personally have experienced as I have gotten longer as I've started hitting it further. My shot shape has also changed just because I'm swinging it longer. I've gone very much from an inside to out and that early extension to an outside to in. And when I do that, if I'm swinging from, 110 miles an hour, which is pretty average, like 110 to 114, I would say is average. And then I really go at one and get up to 118 to 120 and swing slightly longer, man, it can go from fairly straight, nice cut to a massive slice that's out of bounds across the road. 80 to 100 yards right, because the speeds increase, and also I haven't ingrained that longer pattern either. So I can definitely see how people would fall or come unstuck with that. In terms of ingraining a pattern like that, you're giving different time frames before for people. What are the average golfer that I work with, the average person I have listened to this podcast is someone in the 35 to 55 age bracket. They're doing some form of training. What's the shorter end that you've seen someone in that time bracket work on this? If they're getting 1 to 2 range sessions a week versus a longer time, like someone who's taken the longest to do it or just never done it.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's guys that can get it done and make it look significantly better in a couple of weeks. It's very, very doable. I've got a bunch of guys on Skillest where I could show you right now, in 2 weeks, it went from looking pretty bad to pretty good. And, in all honesty, those guys may not be able to take it to the course immediately, but I'm surprised at how many of them are even if I don't think about it, it's actually pretty decent out there and I can hit the ball better. So that's where I often kind of throw out, okay, if we're really talking transfer practice, I call it it's building your dream house. We're building a much better golf swing. This is the golf swing you want when you're 50, 60, so you can beat your buddies and be a scratch. You better start doing the work now, because if you're 70, it's really hard to change these patterns. So let's get the concepts, let's get the body in a shape where we can actually do this so we can enjoy the game long term. And that's where this is to me the non-traditional training. It's the physical training in the gym with a guy like you, and it's the mechanical work with a good pro to make sure that we're building for the future. And then if you have a Friday game with your buddies, you don't have to think about this on the golf course. You can go performance mind out there, and your old golf swing, it's going to function, but you don't have to shoot 150. And then you keep doing that training, and some of it will filter over, and there'll be a time where you can absolutely start flushing it on the range. That's a good time to start using on the course a little bit, right? So start adding it in. So that's usually what I'd say.
Yeah, awesome, man. And I love speaking obviously with golf coaches like yourself who understand the importance of getting the body moving better. Because one of the things that I preach, and a message that I preach, which you obviously agree with what you've just said, is we need the body to be reaching these positions, and we need to be able to do it slowly and controlled in those freezes and the slow backswings and stuff. And we need to actually see the positions that we want to reach. When doing that, the way we build those, if we can't do them when we come and see you straight away, is to go and work on it in the gym. And TPI have a great system in order to get that sorted and assessed and worked out. But then once we're a more moldable piece of clay, going and seeing someone like yourself and actually ingraining those patterns and learning how to ingrain those patterns it's just the best way to do it, because it just sets our foundation or our base much more stable for us to build upon in the future, rather than building an inverted pyramid where we're little practice and little anything and little strength, versus a base of strength, mobility, good movement patterning, understanding and knowledge of the swing and what we're doing in different positions, where the hands should be and all of this. If we've got that, it's so much easier to build the performance on top of it than vice versa.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, so we've talked about freezes, we've talked about slow backswings. I wanted to dive into one thing you said before was internal versus external cues. It's different terminology to what I've used before, but can you just explain what those are and how you use those in teaching people?
Yeah. So, I define external cue, it'd be thinking a little bit more about, what the club itself. And, if I'm thinking about fixing a club path, I really want to feel like you're going inside. I have this analogy of the club path. I feel like I'm playing polo, I'm riding my horse, I need to feel my club going right near my body, right? And so that analogy of go right near my body so I don't hit my horse and kill my horse will really dramatically change some of these things, right? Now, you'll notice when I do that, what do I actually do with my path? Going inside out, I'm actually really extending to make the body change the path. So I think that's where it's kind of interesting is that if I can get the job done with an external cue, that's probably what the research says I should be doing. But sometimes the patterns aren't motor equivalent, meaning if I get your path inside out, you may also early extend. And that's where internal cues can be pretty helpful. And, the most famous internal cue of all time is like Ben Hogan's lead wrist. He was trying to get it cupped. And that's a totally fine cue. Where the research is kind of wonky, and that's where I did my dissertation and research on it, was that basically there's very little account in the research for the validity of internal cues. They say external cues are going to perform better, but they're also good for learning. I think that the research was really short term, meaning like a lot of studies were 1 or 3 days. So if you're giving a golfer 1 day to go learn how to get into flexion wrist, there's no chance that can be very useful on the golf course. It's too difficult. So you might be better off just going with an external cue in performance mode. And that's where the research, I think, is limited. But if we're thinking about how do we build this thing long term, it's okay to use some internal cues. Like I would be okay with you getting some flexion, and I'm okay telling you to like feel like you're pushing your right arm to be straighter. So ultimately, we can find different cues. It's all about finding ways to make the body move appropriately first, and then we start to get the golf ball back involved. I don't need to see you hit golf balls. Like I have a lot of lessons where people come in and we don't actually hit any shots. There's no reason to. Why would I have you hit shots when your swing is absolutely terrible? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, let's build a swing and then I can teach you to square the path or square the face, keep the path zero, and make a contact. Make sense?
Yeah, 100%, man. A lot of the principles that you talk about with teaching people is the exact same with teaching the movement in the gym, right? Like, hitting a golf ball is like, deadlifting a heavy weight. You don't get them in and teach them to lift with a heavy weight. You get them in, and I talk about position 1, position 2, and position 3, teach them from the top down. So starting in the top of the backswing, essentially, rather than picking the weight up from the ground. And once we get down to the bottom, like obviously you're in a great position and we can just stand up, like essentially is the cue. Go 1, 2, 3, you've got the bar in your hand still, just stand up. We know how to stand up as humans. Like, let's just do that.
Yeah.
Cool, man. I'm aware of our time and the fact that we're cutting short, or not cutting short, but we're getting limited on it. So I won't ask any deep questions. The one thing I'll ask before we start wrapping up and learn where people can follow you and find all your content and whatnot is, what's something that you are really interested in at the moment and you're spending a lot of time, your own personal time, like researching or just like diving deep into? Like what's Luke doing in his spare time when he's scrolling? Like what particular things that you're looking at there in golf sense?
Yeah. I mean, I'm really excited to kind of use this model that I've kind of derived. And, I'll throw it on the wall here. Like this is basically my teaching philosophy, and I think it would serve a lot of people and teaching pros well to just understand this. And there's going to be some tweaking to it, but if I could say, like, we have this idea called the challenge zone. So this is a concept by Tim Lee, Mark Guadagnoli. A lot of people are familiar with the work. A lot of people that are just like casual won't know. But the idea of the challenge zone is we're trying to train at a level where we're pushing the limits of what we're used to. This is what we call deliberate practice. And if we're deliberately practicing and we're in the challenge zone, we have to do way less work than if we're doing it inefficiently. This is why, like the country club golfer that maybe plays 3 times a week will literally keep shooting in the 90s the rest of their life. They don't actually practice deliberately. They don't understand the challenge zone. They don't look at feedback. They don't seek expertise. They don't do any of those things. So what we're trying to do is get really efficient at training in the challenge zone, whether that means finding a good fitness guy and or teaching pro, and then maximizing when we're on that scale. Now, where I've kind of drawn this x-axis is mechanics. So when we're doing mechanics, we're doing a lot of internal or divided focus of attention. We're thinking about these things. That goes back into like how I teach golf. Like I want people to think about 17 things. But one of them is not hit a good golf shot. All we're trying to do is hit a great golf shot, put a good golf swing on it. So it's very much like process and movement focus. And the hack for technical practice are shifting expectations. Again, we're not trying to hit good shots. Like I'd encourage you to hit bad shots. We're using segmentation of freezers. We're using slow motion a little bit. We're doing video, foam ball, and we're using constraints. So that would be like very efficient at changing the swing. Again, I don't care about where your golf ball goes. So with that, we're going to leverage down to this side where it's basically a simple task. There's no pressure and it's all block practice. So, people talk about, should I be doing block practice or variable practice? That depends on where you're at in your sort of what I call like skill
paradigm or development. Like, where should we be working? So if you're doing the mechanical breakdown, you don't need to go hit driver and 7-iron the first week. Like, let's make the 7-iron look pretty. We can put on the driver later. You don't have to hit a lot of different shots and different targets. Now, if you're preparing for a tournament, that's when you're going to shift over from mechanics and your mindset goes to variability, pressure, and complex tasks. But you don't have to think about all these other things over here. You don't have to think about mechanics while you're on the golf course. We're just trying to hit good shots. And so learning to shift mindsets is, I think, really where a lot of golfers struggle. You think about all the range rats out there that are kind of thinking mechanics, but they're not actually efficient with that process. They need to do a lot of work with out of ball and or foam balls. And then there's a lot of people that literally never think about their swing. And that's why they shoot 90 or 100 because their mechanics are terrible, but they might have the performance side. So you got to learn how to switch mindsets from being a player on the golf course to being able to be a mechanic and go work on the mechanics, and shifting that mindset and understanding how to do that efficiently. That's the frontier of golf right now, in my opinion.
Yeah, man, I love it. You just see so many different people, preaching these different messages. I think some people just do it for the polarity factor and the fact that it gets, engagement.
Yeah.
Whereas I think some people are doing it because they genuinely believe there's one perfect way to do every single thing. But I think if we just go into things with a less dogmatic approach as to like, this is the only way to do something, I think you can come to some better conclusions a lot faster because you're just more open to everything. And through deliberate practicing, performing a task or having a set goal, doing it repetitively and getting immediate informative feedback, that's essentially the loop for deliberate practice, right?
Yeah.
We need to have a goal, try and do the goal, do it repetitively, get feedback, and then we can, change it. We need to do that. Musicians need to do it to be able to play music better because they play until they miss a note and then they go back to the start. They play it until they get further than that. Golfers, I think it definitely needs, or some golfers need deliberate practice in terms of hitting the same 7-iron 100 times in a row, just like Steph Curry would shoot 100 3-pointers and get them all in. So there needs to be that element, but then also the variability because, then, John Rahm has been interviewed and talked about it. The reason he can hit so many great shots from around the green is because as a kid, he used to go and put the ball in like some terrible lies and then try and play chipping games with his mates to get up and down. That's exactly what I did as a kid as well. We'd put our balls down on the ground and each of us would be allowed to change the lie for the other person, and we'd have to hit a different shot. So some would stomp on it, some would just push it right into the tuft, some would leave it right up so it comes high off the face and it comes out dead. You learn all of these things from trying to do it, not doing it, or doing it, feedback, and then do it again. Yep. So I love that model that you've got there, and I'll definitely be sharing that at some point. I'm sure you've got it as a social media post that I can share at some point, because it takes into account both of those, deliberate practice and variable practice. Those two things. So I love it, man. Before we wrap up, where can people go to follow you, see you on Skillest? I know you mentioned that before, and I'll provide all the links to it in the YouTube and the podcast notes. But where can they find you, and how should they reach out if they want to talk to you more about this stuff?
Sure. Yeah. Find me at Skillest, and then also, on Instagram, Dr. Luke Benoit, and trying to get some nice kind of packaged sort of like programs for slices and for early extension. So if people want to dig on that, and then also just personal lessons if you want to do that. Typically I'll say 1 or 2 months of like a monthly subscription, which you already know is like super, super powerful. You can send me videos and we just go back and forth as much as needed. And your swing is going to look and probably function at a pretty high level. It's unbelievable how much work you can do in 30 or 60 days in your golf swing.
Yeah, 100%, particularly for a lot of golfers who live, it's Minnesota that you are, isn't it?
Yeah.
Minnesota.
Yeah.
You're coming into winter soon, so it'll be all indoors. You'll be making the swings inside there. A lot of the clients that I work with, and I know a lot of the people who listen to this podcast are sort of Northeast, Canadians or even Europeans. So their season, the days of this season are limited for them when this podcast comes out. So I think jumping onto either an online fitness coach or an online swing coach, give yourself 6 months of both of those, you're going to get a significantly different result when you commence next season as opposed to what you've probably done in the past. So mate, thanks so much for your time. I appreciate it. And we'll definitely have to come back and do another one, because every time we talk, I've just got more questions than I have answers, because you just have so much knowledge. So thanks again.
Thanks, Shaun. Super good. I love the symbiotic relationship of this whole thing, and I think you're doing it great. So appreciate it.